Good afternoon to you. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The anti-Semitism of the American left very much on display this week, a shocking sight to behold. So many of us knew about it. It's now out in public for so many others to see. The Biden administration actually picked an organization to help fight anti-Semitism. It is now defending Hamas. What happened? The reporter who broke this story is Chuck Ross. He's an investigative reporter for the Washington Free Beacon, and he joins us now. Chuck, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
Tell us about this story. The Biden administration was trying to curb anti-Semitism, at least that's the claim they made. And so what did they do to undertake that effort, and how has it blown up in their face?
Yeah, so this was back in May. The White House convened a group of civil rights organizations, advocacy groups, Anti-Defamation League, and others to combat anti-Semitism. A noble initiative. But they also chose a couple of organizations that are kind of go against the whole spirit of the initiative. They picked first of all, they picked the National Action Network, which is led by Al Sharpton, who has a long history of making anti-Semitic remarks. But then also more germane to the current events, as the Council on American-Islamic Relations. They're a well-known Muslim American advocacy group. They've been around for nearly 30 years. They have long been very vocal supporters of the Palestinian cause, and the White House picked them. Their role in this whole initiative was to do a tour around the United States to help religious institutions, whether it be synagogues or mosques or churches, how to shore up their defenses against potential hate crime attacks. So the irony here is that CARE, as they're known, was helping synagogues defend against attacks, and now, as we reported the other day, the organization has basically defended Hamas's attack on the Jewish state there, and so it's just irony, hypocrisy, whatever you want to call it. Just the fact that
yes,
the administration chose this organization out of all the organizations they could choose from. This was one of them they picked to lead this cause. And I should also mention, I'm sure we'll get into it here, but CARE has been linked 20 years ago in the Holy Land Foundation case, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of. They were named as an unindicted co-conspirator in that case, and that case was all about these groups in the United States covertly funding Hamas, a terrorist organization.
Yes.
So this organization has a history of supporting Hamas and doing all these things, and now they're here leading this charge to fight anti-Semitism.
They've been very annoyed for years that they are correctly referred to as an unindicted co-conspirator in that case. They've been trying to fight back against that for years, but boy, every time they have a chance to try and turn over a new leaf, they refuse to, because that's what's happening. I mean, what you describe here is in your piece today, which is excellent at the Washington Free Beacon. You said, in reaction to the attack this weekend, CARE cast blame for the attack squarely on Israel. On Monday, the group, that is CARE, urged lawmakers to address the root causes of Mideast violence, end quote, which it attributed to the, quote, Israeli government's apartheid policies. You also referenced this guy, Nihad Awad, the executive director of CARE, who referred to Israel as a, quote, settler colonial apartheid state in the wake of the attacks, and decried the placement of the Israeli flag on the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Presumably, they put it up on the Eiffel Tower to signal solidarity with the Israeli people, having just been attacked by terrorists. And he says in his writings on social media, you must condemn the occupier, not the occupied. So they're straight up rooting on the terrorist attack. How could any normal human being see babies beheaded and think, I'm on their side?
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I mean, he also wrote that Israel equals Russia, and referencing the Ukraine-Russian war. And there's no direct criticism at all from this organization or Nihad Awad of Hamas or any of the other organizations taking part in this. And it's just glaringly obvious that they just want to place complete blame, complete pressure on Israel for all of this. And as you quoted there, they want to blame Israel for the underlying. They want to blame the victim essentially of the attack for inviting the attack on themselves, and it's preposterous. And again, going back to the fact that this organization, and they've been doing this for decades. I mean, it's not something they just started doing now. It's well known that this organization has used this rhetoric, but yet, and it's in news reports. When you and I were at the Daily Caller, we wrote about them a lot. My previous employer, White House knows about all this stuff, yet they still are working with them.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. I want to about the White House's handling here. So they're clearly linked to these vicious anti-Semites at CARE. The White House has decided we're going to rely on you for advice on how to stop anti-Semitism, which is truly insane, especially in light of everything we know now. And the White House this week has come out and said that the members of the so-called squad were wrong and repugnant and disgraceful when they made their remarks, either in support of Hamas or refused to condemn the terror attack. Has the White House issued a statement on its links to CARE? Has it said a thing about this?
Not that I'm aware of. They did not respond to me on this. No surprise. But I haven't seen that they've been asked in any of the White House press briefings. I think it would be a very good question to put to an official there. Just, it's a very good test of where they actually stand on this stuff. Are you going to continue? You can, and the White House, to their defense, has said, has mostly come around and defended Israel and pushed back against some of the squad members' rhetoric and things like that. So they're to be commended for that. But when the spotlight is not on this issue, they're inviting groups like CARE and paying lip service or whatever, or giving support to these organizations and giving them a platform. It's a very prestigious platform to be, working with the White House on anything, and it boosts that organization. I'm sure that after this, hopefully this war, at least in this current iteration, ends soon, but I'm sure next year CARE will be respected again and welcomed with open arms by perhaps the White House, but definitely progressives. So
I think about, the organization CARE. I will say one of the headlines that I'm reminded of recently where their name popped up was they were on the right side of one issue, at least, which is that they don't think pornography should be in the schools. So, like the parents in Dearborn, Michigan, the Muslim parents there, CARE was standing in solidarity with them and saying, hey, no pornography in the schools. Let's get rid of this stuff. And that's all well and good. That's totally fine, and it's great. That's the kind of thing you should support. But when you have Israeli babies being beheaded and women being raped and people being kidnapped, and the terrorism is just so explicit and obvious here, it is just ridiculous that they would come out and they'd be like, who the victims here are the Hamas, the Palestinians, and the real bad guys are the Jews of Israel. And the White House still links their arms with them on that issue, and then pretends like the porn issue doesn't exist.
Yeah, and to kind of flip what you're saying there on its head, I kind of was watching this debate as well, and not to criticize necessarily, single anybody out, but there were some conservatives who were pointing to CARE, like, oh yeah, look, they're on the right side of this issue. And I was just kind of thinking, well, maybe on that issue, but on a whole lot of other issues there, I would say on the wrong side of them. So,
totally.
There's the Onion article where, a guy who I disagree with is right, on this one issue. So,
yes.
It's a well-known history with these guys. And, it's we'll see if the White House says anything about them. But
they'll only say something if they're asked by an outlet that they think is on their side. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, so let's move on to another issue. There's a Democrat by the name of Bob Menendez, who is an unbelievable. He's a cartoon character of a villain, I think. He takes his corrupt payouts in the form of gold bars and immense amounts of cash, according to the government prosecutors. And today, there was a new charge dropped on Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey. They are now saying that he's being indicted for being an agent of a foreign power, that is Egypt. This is a wild story, isn't it, Chuck?
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, Menendez is one of the most powerful senators. He was head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which has enormous power, and he used that perch to make money for himself. It's just innocent until proven guilty and all that stuff. But the information laid out in this indictment today, and then the indictment a few weeks ago, is just pretty strong. I mean, there's text message evidence of him talking about doing advocacy work on behalf of Egyptian intelligence officials, and he's talking about telling his wife and their friends about the work he was doing to help and all these things. And the allegation on what he did for Egypt is just, it's crazy. I mean, he turned over a list of names of people in the U.S. consulate in Cairo, it's not classified information, but it's very sensitive information that a foreign government could exploit in some way.
And dangerously reckless for a senator with that much power and that much obvious knowledge about America's security to do that.
Yeah, if you think back to something like Benghazi, where, knowledge of the consulate or the consulate at that time helped terrorists kill American diplomats. I mean, not that was in the works here. I'm not saying that, but it's still information that Egypt would have wanted to have, and so he sold it to them essentially.
Oh my God! And
and one hypocrisy that was pointed out in the indictment today is that Bob Menendez is obviously aware of foreign agent laws and what is or is not allowed, because back a couple years ago, he sent a letter to the Justice Department urging an investigation into a Republican congressman for foreign agent violations. And that congressman down in Florida, he was ultimately charged and pleaded guilty. So, it's just stunningly, it's just really, like you said, it's just one of the craziest cases involving a U.S. politician that I've seen, as far as the information he did, what he did, all the people he tried to influence, the gold bars that he took, and he's still running for re-election. So that puts the New Jersey seat up for grabs, in a sense. And it's New Jersey. No offense to New Jersey, but I mean, I could see him winning the primary and being the candidate for senator.
All right, you ready? I'm going to read.
Good for Republicans.
I just went to Bob Menendez's website. This is his official government website. And this is a press release he put out February 14th of 2019. Headlined, Menendez, we must consider the possibility that President Trump is compromised by Russia. Isn't that hilarious? So Menendez gave a big floor speech. In fact, there's a video here. He delivered a speech on the floor of the U.S. Senate, considering the possibility. I'm sorry, this is too good. I'm just going to randomly play this. Let's see if we can hear anything interesting here.
I'm talking about the entirely legitimate question of whether Donald Trump could be compromised by the Russian government.
Oh, amazing. An amazing clip. So here is Menendez being like, hey, I think Trump's an agent of a foreign power. This dude is selling us out to the Egyptians the whole time.
Yeah. Meeting with Egyptian officials, taking money. I mean, it's. I was not aware. I knew he had said stuff about Trump like that, but I wasn't aware he said such a money quote like that. It's pretty good.
Bob Menendez. He's the corrupt gift that keeps on giving in gold bars. Mm-hmm. Chuck Ross, thank you very much from the Washington Free Beacon for your excellent reporting as always. Thank you, sir. This Bob Menendez audio I was just referencing with Chuck Ross, this is February 14th, 2019, Valentine's Day. Bob Menendez gave this speech. I just want to play a little bit of the top of it again.
I'm talking about the entirely legitimate question of whether Donald Trump could be compromised by the Russian government. It's more than a legitimate question. It's the natural question that comes to mind every time we learn more about the links between President Trump, his associates, and the Russian government. With the Mueller investigation possibly coming to a close in the near future, we may be forced to deal with, both Congress and the American public, with some very stark facts about the president's ties to Russia.
Yes.
Just think about the reported revelations over the last month or so.
Oh, do tell.
We've learned that President Trump took unprecedented steps to conceal the contents of his conversations with Putin from his own advisors.
It's amazing. So the federal government's indictments say that Bob Menendez, literally in the moments that he is speaking here, he's in the midst of this international conspiracy to sell us out to advantage the Egyptians. And he's deleting all of the evidence of his messages with his wife and his associates to prevent authorities from being able to prove their case. This is all in the indictment. So here he is. I mean, this is talking about a healthy case of projection or an unhealthy case of projection, pointing at Trump and going, that man is guilty of colluding with the Russians. He is compromised. I can tell. Take it from an expert. That guy is totally compromised. And so the indictment today says that the activities took place from January 2018. That would be more than a full year before Menendez even makes these remarks, until June of 2022. Must be nice to be a Democrat. You can go 4 years without being detected at all. Just, in a full-blown corruption scandal, selling us out to a foreign government. Nobody even thinks to look. Menendez, according to the indictment now, promised to take and took a series of acts on behalf of Egypt, including on behalf of Egyptian military and intelligence officials. He conspired to do so with his wife, Nadine, and a business associate and fellow defendant, Wael Hana. So Bob Menendez, accused of being the same old corrupt guy we knew he was before. Just change a little bit of the details. It's always the same thing. It's the ophthalmologist in Florida. It's the hookers in the Dominican Republic. It's staying at the lush resort in the DR, flying on the private jet with his corrupt buddy, selling us out to Egypt, the halal meat company, selling the halal food company, just having a monopoly on that, taking kickbacks for overcharging food companies to export to Egypt. It's Bob Menendez, New Jersey Democrat, just being a New Jersey Democrat. Coming up, I've got some updates for you. They let anybody in the Senate, don't they? That's what John Fetterman has to say. We'll tell you about it. Well, good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A lot more to get to in the little time we have left. We've got a Washington Post headline for you on the latest on that speaker race. With support for Scalise in limbo, some Republicans look for alternatives, is the headline. They say some House Republicans have begun to conclude that Majority Leader Steve Scalise has little chance of being elected Speaker of the House, throwing the fractured conference further into chaos as members potentially reignite the search for a nominee who can unite them. Scalise, meanwhile, has vowed to stay in the race, holding smaller meetings Thursday afternoon, that's today, with different factions of the Republican conference to try to resolve their differences. Scalise claims that his support is continuing to grow. We're going to continue to go through this process as we grow our support, work towards getting this resolved and getting the House back open. Yeah, yesterday, Scalise beat Jim Jordan in what was a pretty narrow vote behind closed doors, which means that this is not resolved. I realized there were a million headlines yesterday. Well, Steve Scalise is going to be the next speaker. I don't think that's how this works. It's not over till it's over, right? And it certainly is not over. In fact, there's been some reporting today that Steve Scalise may even drop out of this race fairly imminently, and that could be, if he just doesn't have enough votes to get him across the finish line, that makes a lot of sense that he might do that. The only thing that would keep him in the race, presumably, would be his ego. If it's impossible, all you're doing is dragging out the inevitable, right? Here is a report from Newsmax today that caught my attention, certainly.
Hi, Ben. John, good morning. And sources are telling Newsmax that Steve Scalise will not be able to garner the 217 votes needed to become Speaker of the House. And those sources also tell us that Scalise is expected to drop out of the race. That could come as soon as today. Now, if that does happen, we're hearing that Jim Jordan could jump back into the race. Remember that he only had 99 votes from the Republican conference behind closed doors yesterday, compared to greater total for Steve Scalise. But again, if Scalise drops out, it looks like Jordan will re-enter the race. We're also hearing that there's a possibility of Tom Emmer, who's currently the majority whip, to enter the running to become Speaker of the House, and also Kevin Hern. He is a Republican congressman from Oklahoma who leads the largest Republican caucus here on Capitol Hill. So
now, you remember yesterday we had Adam Brandon on from FreedomWorks. You remember he said it was there was a pretty high chance that neither Jim Jordan nor Steve Scalise would emerge as the Speaker. And I'm just sitting here waiting to figure out, what's going to happen. I'm just sitting on the sidelines observing all of this. Who's going to be the next Speaker of the House? But that was the report from Newsmax earlier. Now, having said that, Newsmax had another report out today, later in the afternoon. They say Representative Dan Muser to Newsmax, Scalise is not stepping down yet, despite reports. This is Newsmax's reporting. Despite reports that Representative Steve Scalise might ultimately end his run for Speaker, Representative Dan Muser of Pennsylvania, Republican, told Newsmax that the notion is premature. Quote, that is absolutely not true. Muser told Thursday's National Report about Scalise ending his candidacy, saying Representative Jim Jordan is going to make a House GOP appeal to back Scalise as Speaker. Jordan being gracious in this race. Quote, Steve Scalise does have over 200 of our 222 members, so he's by far the leading candidate. Of course, we voted for him by majority in our conference. Jim Jordan has stated he would come out and nominate Steve Scalise because I was backing Jim Jordan as well, so we believe that will move forward. So anyway, the fighting continues. If they had an answer, they'd be on the House floor right now. There'd be a vote for Speaker. There is not. But maybe the goal this time is to work it out behind closed doors before they ever get to the Speaker vote, right? Instead of doing 15 rounds in public, you get Matt Rosendale standing up there. Everyone thinks he's going to say Kevin McCarthy. He goes, Kevin Hern. Oh my gosh, that was just give me a second. I'm going to pull this audio up. One of the funniest moments in that Speaker fight is the whole room is groaning that Rosendale said Kevin Hern. Let's see if I can't locate my boy here. Matt Rosendale. Here he is. Matt Rosendale, Kevin Hern.
Rosendale.
Kevin
Hern.
Some good old-fashioned trolling. I like that. Again, we'll see. That's the update on the Speaker race for now, and things are in chaos, and nothing's voted upon yet. They do have to get to, they've got to move relatively quickly, though, in terms of the budget priorities. Otherwise, we've got to have another continuing resolution just ahead of Thanksgiving. That's how far Kevin McCarthy and company had stretched out the government's spending, the out-of-control spending of our government, and that's got to be tackled. It really does. If you want a nation for yourself, nevertheless your kids and your grandkids, we've got to get that under control. $33 trillion in debt. And inflation is still bananas. More inflation numbers today, it's not coming down. It's just crap. I don't know how else to put it. The White House keeps dressing it up. They're like, oh, it's totally great. Bidenomics is working for everybody. It is not. Here's Corinne today, doing her Baghdad Bob routine.
But CPI inflation, the CPI inflation report came out today. It was hotter than expected, 3.7% year over year, unchanged from the prior month. You talk about all the spending last year to lower costs. The last couple of months, how is that lowering costs?
So, look, what we believe is that Bidenomics is in action, right? You're talking about lowering costs.
Bidenomics? Who's the White House press secretary? Can we see her, please?
Lowering costs.
So, look, what we believe is that Bidenomics is in action, right? You're talking about lowering costs, right? And that's something that the president is certainly continuing to do. Inflation is falling while employment remains strong. As you speak to CPI, inflation has fallen 60%. Since last summer, and the core inflation, as you're speaking to this data, fell to its lowest level in 2 years, and so that matters. Let's not forget about wages are higher than they were last year.
Let me point out the sleight of hand that some person at the White House fed her. Core inflation is improving. Really? So what is core inflation? Core inflation means we're not going to measure the cost of food or energy. That's what it's a number sans food and energy. So in what world is, quote, core inflation the way that you would measure how much you're spending? Never. You would never do that because your biggest expenditures are, among them, are what do you put in your family's mouth? The food you consume. Kind of an important thing, right? Dramatically more expensive. Well, if you strip out food, things are a little bit cheaper. Energy prices. Energy prices are at the center of all of this. And they're higher. Things are out of control. And everything's fine. Bionomics is running great.
Accounting for inflation. Prices fell for core goods like cars and furniture for the fourth month in a row. All of those pieces are in the data, the CPI that came out today.
And people can't afford them.
That matters.
But people still hear Bionomics and they see rent is up 7.4% year over year. Car repairs, car insurance is up almost 19%. So costs are not coming down for all Americans.
That's the Fox Business reporter, I believe, who is raising these questions today. And thank goodness for that, pointing out the obvious. Things are not actually coming down. The situation is not improving at all. More from that White House press briefing today. I mentioned John Kirby did come in with some Israel data today in terms of Americans who were killed there in that terrorist attack. He said 27 Americans killed, 14 unaccounted for, missing. And he once again reminded the press room that we need to prepare ourselves for some very gruesome things to come. And I assume that also means as it relates to American hostages.
We all need to be prepared for the fact that there's going to be additional gruesome images coming out. And there's going to be some pretty tough reports for all of us to swallow. This is not over.
Yeah, you wonder to what extent he's just trying to use some sort of educated prediction of what comes next as Israel stages on the border of the Gaza Strip to go after Hamas for its terror attack, or to what extent this is based on actual intelligence. Does the United States have some intel on the fate of American citizens in custody right now of Hamas? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. John Kirby today was asked about the $6 billion again. The Biden administration has been running around trying to say, oh, just because we let Iran have $6 billion doesn't mean we're helping terrorists out. Really? Because it seems pretty obvious to literally anybody who's ever balanced a checkbook that is exactly what you're doing. In fact, there are a number of senators, to include a couple of Democrats, people like Joe Manchin, who are saying, you know, maybe we should refreeze that $6 billion. Not a good idea to give it to Iran, actually, given that their whole thing is using money to murder people. Maybe we should stop letting that happen. So there's a report today that the Biden administration, after pretending that $6 billion didn't have anything to do with Iran's fueling of terror attacks on Israel, the Biden administration is now actually refreezing it? Are they? The Washington Post headline, U.S., Qatar agree to stop Iran from tapping $6 billion fund after Hamas attack. U.S. officials in the Qatari government have agreed to stop Iran from accessing a $6 billion account for humanitarian assistance in light of Hamas's attack on Israel, Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo told House Democrats on Thursday. Okay, so they have a person on the record. They told House Democrats, and this is, quote, according to two people who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe the private remarks. So this is Democrats telling the Washington Post, the Biden administration just told us they are refreezing this $6 billion. So clearly they realize what a massive screw-up this is, and Democrats would like to make it go away, right? Stop asking us about how we're funding terrorism. So that's the story. That's the lead here on the Washington Post piece. So Kirby was asked about this today in the White House press briefing, and here's his kind of weirdly mysterious answer.
John, what is the status of the $6 billion that Iran was set to have access to?
It's still sitting in the Qatari bank, all of it, every dime of it.
Is there an agreement now to, in essence, withhold it from Iran should they come asking for it?
None of that money has been spent, and I have no updates to provide today.
Why is everything a secret? Why are you always giving them the benefit of all of these? You know, the American people want to know, certainly the Israelis want to know. Why can't you just say, yep, we froze it again? We're not letting Iran have this money, not after what they did.
Follow up on these questions about the $6 billion. I understand Iran hasn't accessed any of this yet. It's intended for humanitarian purposes, but there have been reports of this quiet agreement. So yes or no, if Iran wanted to access this today?
Yes or no. Simple.
Today, could they?
I'm not going to speculate one way or another here about future transactions. What I can tell you is none of it has been accessed, and we are watching every dime.
The totally embarrassing. Jackie Heinrich tries it again from Fox.
Why is it that you won't come out and say that the U.S. does not intend to let this money go to Iran?
Jackie, we've always had, since the beginning, we've always had the ability to provide oversight over the disbursement of these funds.
Oh my gosh, what a false, what a canard. I mean, for him to say, well, we can watch what they're spending it on. If they spend it on food, we'll know. Yeah, but that's not, this is misdirection. This is misdirection. So we're going to fund all of the administrative functions of Iran so they can use the money they have for terrorism. That's what you're telling us? And you know what's amazing? In Corinne's case, you could write her off as just being a moron. You could say, you know what? She's just too stupid to know. And somebody told her this, and she's repeating it. She's just too dumb. Kirby's not that dumb. Kirby knows the game he's playing, and he knows he's lying to you.
We've always had the option, if we wanted it, to look at transactions and to make a call about whether we found it valid or not.
He must think you're the biggest sucker ever, that you believe this. Like, look, we have total control over this. No concern. So if that's the case, why am I seeing headlines that your administration just told Democrats that you're freezing it? I love how they want everything both ways. It's like, it's totally fine. That's $6 billion. It's only going to be used for like birthday parties and stuff. There's no chance that it's going to be misused. Nobody's going to get attacked or killed with that $6 billion. And then meanwhile, they're telling Democrats in the House behind closed doors, hey guys, we're freezing this money. It's a bad idea to give Iran this cash right now.
That has not changed. And even now, as you and I are speaking, none of that money has been accessed.
Oh, forget it. Whatever. He's just going to keep doing the spin game. Now, I told you a moment ago that I have some audio for you that I do want to share with you before we run out of time today. It's a father in Israel whose 8-year-old daughter was murdered in the terrorist attack this weekend. So in that sense, prepare yourself for this audio. It's just a father relaying that he learned of his daughter's death. But this, in terms of just the horrors of war and a father's love for his daughter, he comes to the conclusion, you can hear it, this is an interview with CNN's Clarissa Ward, who's a real journalist who really goes into these war zones and really captures some very harrowing things. He's telling her that he was relieved to find out that she was dead, rather than, in his view, something worse. I can barely process it. This is the father speaking to CNN.
They just said, we found Emily. She's dead. And I went, yes! I went, yes, and smiled. Because that is the best news of the possibilities that I knew. That was the best possibility that I was hoping for.
And we actually spoke with one man, originally from Ireland, who was separated from his 8-year-old daughter. She had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house who also lived in the kibbutz. And he described to us the agonizing moment. After 2 days of waiting for answers, he was rescued. He finally found out that his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had been killed.
She was either dead or in Gaza. And if you know anything about what they do to people in Gaza, that is worse than death. That is worse than death. The way they treat you. They'd have no food. They'd have no water. She'd be in a dark room filled with Christ knows how many people and terrified every minute, hour, day, and possible years to come. So death was a blessing, an absolute blessing.
It breaks your heart. It breaks your heart. This is why it's so important to recognize the goodness of God, the existence of eternal life, what comes next. And just, you hope you never have to experience that or be anywhere near that. And yet there are people today on this planet who are dealing with that. That father is just brutal, just absolutely brutal. And that actually happened. We talk about seeing the horrors of war and coming to a realization of what it's really about. That father's experiencing it, and I think it's important that we hear it. It certainly was for me. There's a pro-Hamas event going on today at the University of Washington, and this is what it sounds like. It's totally deranged.
Palestine is our demand! No peace on stolen land! No peace on stolen land! Palestine is our demand!
You know, these are people who are out supporting terrorism. First of all, as always, pray for your country. And secondly, we're going to keep our head on a swivel. We've got a lot of news. We got that crazy Hamas guy calling for jihad and global demonstrations tomorrow. Just, again, hold your family close. Pray for our country. Pray for our planet. And stay with us here on WMAL. We'll keep you up to date. We got the great one, Mark Levin, up next.